within the streams are a heavy presence of E. coli and nitrogen and phosphorus. And most of the stream banks, when you go down and look at them, are eroding. The banks are eroding, and the streams are becoming channelized, and they can't get out into the floodplain when a heavy rain occurs. So all that water is forced down through the channel. So that's one of the biggest problems, is we're capture and clean that water on site rather than allowing it to just sit and then slowly be released to the streams.
Reproducing in that stream, and that's pretty cool to have a trout stream a few miles out of town for residents, which is, it's actually become, based on DNR creel surveys, the 6th most fish stream in Iowa. And you know, we're pretty excited about that, and with all the different land uses that go into this watershed, it starts out at agricultural ground and then goes into commercial ground and industrial and residential. There's a lot of challenges there. You know, so we've got a lot of different inputs that we're working on. So when we talk about projects, it's everything from working with agriculture producers to
Julian, Greens, like most Americans, are disgusted by the collusion between Wall Street, multinational corporations, and our own government. We know, as most Americans do, that these large corporations are no longer merely exercising power. They are literally ruling over us. In your book, When Google Met WikiLeaks, you describe, quote, a special relationship, end quote, between Google, the U.S. State Department, and Hillary Clinton. Could you talk about that, please?
Well, I just want to correct very quickly some false reporting. Very interestingly, when we published the DNC leaks, the New York Times, which has picked its favorite candidate, as has Bloomberg, which is Hillary Clinton, said that I intended to harm Hillary Clinton. This is what we've been doing for 10 years. It was a completely fabricated story by Charlie Savage. Okay, but yes, we are very interested in power and publishing the truth about power so people can work out, however they choose, to reform power. And so Google is a kind of new power on the block, so we're interested in it, and we're also interested in Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State and now running for presidential candidacy. So these two powers have merged at a kind of personal level and political level, and even to a small extent at the organizational level. So that book, written 3 years ago, has been proved to be very prescient. The chairman of Google, who was the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, has started about a year ago a company to run Hillary Clinton's digital campaign. Google has attended the White House on average over the last 4 years once per week, more than any other single company. It spends more money lobbying Washington, D.C. than any other single company. Hillary Clinton's former staffer, Jared Cohen, was hired by Google in 2009 to head up Google's internal think tank. There's a lot of other interconnections between Google and the state. Eric Schmidt is now also, at the same time as being chairman of what is now Google's parent company, Alphabet, is chairman of the Pentagon Innovation Board. So you have a connection between Google, the Clinton campaign, which will be almost certainly the next White House, and the Pentagon. And this triangle is extremely worrying because as time goes by, Google is understanding that it does have an ability to influence election campaigns. It's also bought more than 10 drone companies. It's integrating its mapping data in order to better be able to fly and navigate drones around the world, as expanding into every country in the world. And it has a very strange quasi-religious vision of the future, this vision of the singularity. It's really, go and research that. It's very disturbing what they believe in Silicon Valley, that they believe they can create a massive artificial intelligence more powerful than any human being or any society's ability to think. And of course, we all know what happens when such power is in limited hands. And so Google in the White House will be essentially an unregulatable company. It's a question whether it's already unregulatable, but you can just completely forget about any kind of antitrust legislation being used on Google if they're White House.
To deal with it when it's all rushing to one location.
Exactly. Yep.
So you talked a little bit about the ag community, and they play a really important role in this in Dubuque County, and talked about some of the practices that they're working on. But what's the benefit to them? Why are they really engaged in this conversation?
I think the benefit to agriculture producers is, we've never come across as regulatory people that want to come in and tell agri-producers what they need to do on their land, and this is what they need to do to protect flooding and water quality. It's more or less been an approach of how can we help you with your practices on your farm, things that are going on your property. How can we be of assistance to you? And oftentimes, you meet with an agriculture producer and he's interested in putting a pond in or a sediment control structure in. It's really a win-win situation oftentimes for him and for the overall watershed health. He's keeping that topsoil on their property is important to them. Not losing all their topsoil is important, and it has to be, and it's important to us. We don't want that topsoil in our streams at all either. So I think the incentives for agriculture producers is to work together to come up with solutions on their farms that minimize nitrogen leaving, that minimize phosphorus leaving, and of course sediment ultimately leaving their farms. So it's looking at cost. We're looking at ways that we can cost share our practices, working with the NRCS, the Soil and Water Conservation District, and cost sharing on practices so that we can get some of these practices paid for them as well too.
Awesome. And Dean, what about for residents in the city? They're listening to this thinking, how can I get involved? What can I do on my own property that makes a difference?
Yeah, well, I think as Eric touched on, I think soil quality restoration is one of the biggest things that we can start to look at to improve the soil profile within a yard and to help it become more spongy and take up that water and not create erosion or the need for additional fertilizers, which most of the time run off into our streams. As we mentioned before, the rain garden program, I know people are interested in having rain barrels. Of course, we partnered on that a few years ago to get a lot of rain barrels into the city. But the stream bank stabilization program, the rain garden program are still available. We have funding every year for that. For anybody that wants to look at some of the water issues.
Convention in Houston, being interviewed by former Green Party presidential candidate David Cobb. Assange's books include When Google Met WikiLeaks, which is based on Assange's meeting with Google CEO Eric Schmidt 5 years ago when Assange was under house arrest in England before he was granted political asylum in Ecuador, now living in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, afraid if he steps foot outside.
I saw it written across the sky. The revolution starts now. Yeah.
The Revolution Starts Now by Steve Earle. This is Democracy Now! We are breaking with convention, war, peace, and the presidency. I'm Amy Goodman. We continue our coverage of the Green Party Convention in Houston with the party's 2004 presidential candidate David Cobb interviewing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
The Public Works Department does a good job at really managing how much salt to put on the roads. Obviously, with a hilly terrain, we have to apply that to make it safe for residents, but looking at the amounts that we use, and beet juice.
So what do you mean they're using beet juice with the salt?
Well, one of the alternatives that the nation has found through studies is that beet juice will help with the de-icification process. So that's being added to
Maria. I mean, it's a very sad situation, but I think given the reality has always been that the presidency pretty quickly merges with the bureaucracy that it's around it, because bureaucracy is enormous and the corporate lobbyists are enormous compared to the political parties. It could net.
One I'm sure people are aware of is the Bee Branch Creek Restoration Project, and we were fortunate enough to partner with the Bee Branch to get money for Catfish Creek watershed through the SRF funding process. So the interest that would normally be paid back on the Bee Branch project will be applied to Catfish Creek. So in the summer of 2015, we'll be starting some projects within the Catfish Creek watershed.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to have partnered with the City of Dubuque and the Watershed Authority Board. The unique stream in the trout stream up at Swiss Valley that where Catfish Creek starts, and I think to have kids go out there and be able to play in the stream, and to have fishermen go out there and fish, and the recreational opportunities out there is pretty special. And I think ultimately we want to have that, bring that health to the overall watershed. How can we continue to...
North Americans need to have a little more humility as we look to our sisters and brothers in the global south who have been fighting empire for 500 years. They have a more acute understanding of actually social movements and electoral arm of their social movement. So we should be humble and learn that lesson. Julian.
Iowa is looking at this as strong policies. Catfish Creek is just one of 12 watershed authority boards within the state. There are watershed authority boards like the Turkey River, which is close to us, which is 1 million acres and comprises many counties. So we're just one small piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of work to go yet in the state with the creation of more watershed authority boards and people getting plans in place, but it's starting to take hold, and I think with the legislation that passed, with the creation of watershed authority boards, state legislators are looking at this as a viable option for cleaning Iowa waters.
Well, and water quality's been a hot topic, and it has really for the last 5-10 years. It's been a topic that's continued to be talked about. Iowa, you know, has been one of those states that's been criticized for water quality. And when you look at the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico and the hypoxic zone and everything else that goes on there, when we talk about sustainability, not only as a local community, but when we look at sustainability from a global perspective, it is important that we are looking at ways in Catfish Creek, in the Catfish Creek watershed, and throughout the state of Iowa, that looking at ways that how we're reducing the nutrients, how we're looking at improving infiltration and slowing water down.
Well, they can contact Eric or I at any time to meet with us about implementing projects on their site. They can go to www.catfishcreekwatershed.org. From there, they can view our watershed management plan and the executive summary. There's a way to become involved within the website, and of course we're on social media. So.
Great. Well, Dean and Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much.
And thanks for joining us for another episode of Sustainability Today.
You're watching City Channel Dubuque, home of city council meetings and other informative programming related to local government. We're found on Mediacom cable at Channel 8 if you have a converter box, or Channel 85.2 if you connect the cable directly to your television. This channel also streams on the city's website. But do you know about our other channel? City Channel Graphics is devoted to announcements about the city, meeting notices, road closures, downtown weather data, and other local government information. These same graphics are seen in between programs on the main City Channel, but you can always find them on our other channel. Just select Channel 80 if you have a converter box, or Channel 85.3 if you connect the cable directly to your television. You'll know you're watching City Channel Graphics if you hear the computerized voice of the NOAA weather radio station serving Dubuque.
And now, your National Weather Service forecast for Dubuque and surrounding areas.
So if you turn on your TV to find the temperature in downtown Dubuque and see a meeting or other program on the air, just flip to channel 80 or 85.3 and you'll find exactly what you're looking for. City Channel Graphics, the other channel from the city of Dubuque.
This is City Channel Dubuque, the local government access channel. Cable Channel 8 or Digital 85.2. Streaming live on cityofdubuque.org.
I'm Roy Buell, and as mayor of Dubuque, and on behalf of my city council colleagues, city staff, and 58,000 residents of Dubuque, it's my honor to welcome you to the 6th annual Growing Sustainable Communities Conference. For those not familiar with the history of the Growing Sustainable Communities Conference, the half-day inaugural conference was established 6 years ago by the city of Dubuque. The goal of that inaugural conference was to launch an educational summit about the study of climate change and the importance of leadership for sustainability initiatives. It also allowed us to showcase Dubuque's model for sustainability as a holistic approach that includes economic prosperity, environmental integrity, and social and cultural vibrancy. That first year, we provided a venue where community and business leaders, elected officials, students, and private citizens alike from the tri-state region could come together to learn from experts and share best practices. Now, 6 years later, the Growing Sustainable Communities Conference remains true to its origin, but our audience has grown, and this year we have delegates from over 90 cities across 25 states. That's pretty significant. We have also been privileged to have national speakers each year who recognize that our balanced approach to sustainability is a model for cities across the United States. It is this very model that is covered in the National Civic League report that is at each of your seats. This report showcases some of the work we're doing around sustainability and the impact that it is having. I encourage you to read this report and over the next 2 days to take advantage of the high quality of programming and sharing your best practices around sustainability and resiliency. I want to take a moment to develop a solid conference agenda with presenters. I direct your attention to the back cover of the conference. In particular, I want to recognize the main sponsor, the City of Dubuque, and our planning partner, Sustainable City Network. Thank you very much. I also want to recognize our sponsors, without whom some of this programming would not be possible, including conference sponsor, Crescent Electric Supply Company, and GE Lighting, as well as our keynote luncheon banquet, and network sponsors, all of whom are listed in the program. Lastly, I want to acknowledge that as part of our sustainability principle of healthy local foods, much of your meal has been sourced from local producers. Before introducing our keynote speaker, I want to share with you information from a report entitled The Soul of the Community. This report looks specifically at why people love where they live and why it matters.